These are, I want to talk about the temptations away from beauty, which the last question sort of anticipated. First of all, the fact that beauty is challenging. Second of all, and this is where we'll spend the most time, disorder and banality, where you pick either order or surprise and basically tear beauty apart. And lastly, thirdly, how to resist the temptations to disorder and banality. So first of all, beauty is a challenge. When I was first planning this class and planning this book, I was explaining how surprise is, I think, and wonder is an essential component of beauty. And my wife said, well, what do you mean by surprise? She's really great to run ideas by, because she never thinks any of my ideas are any good. So it's very, very helpful. And I said, well, surprise, like, it's not predictable. She said, well, that's dumb, because you just said that part of beauty is order. And insofar as something is orderly, it's predictable. So I wept and I went to my office and tried to figure it all out. Because that seemed about right. It seemed like to the extent that something is orderly, it grows predictable. And to the extent that it's predictable, it's not surprising. So what do you do? If you're trying to combine these two, isn't this a losing battle? And the answer is, right, so by the way, so people think you have to pick one or the other. They think order and surprise conflict. But what you have to do, as I mentioned before, is you have to develop the discipline of perceiving deeper levels of order. Why? Because reality is rich enough that it's always possible to find the deeper levels and to be surprised by them. And what you notice, what I thought about, is that the people who are bored by something are the people who think they understand it, but don't really. So I'll give you an example from me. I'm not really into baseball. I know how the rules work, and I think I've got it down. But I know that that's because my knowledge of baseball is actually very superficial. And in fact, I guess one of my friends was telling me that the thing you hear all the time from announcers and commentators in baseball is, I've been watching this game 40 years, I never saw anything like that. People who continue to learn more about just about anything are constantly surprised by it. Right? If that's true of things like, right, if the fascination, I'm constantly, and it's funny, you hear the same things. I go to chess clubs, and you hear the same things. They'll say, oh, that's beautiful, beautiful mate, beautiful mate. What does that mean? It means it's orderly, and they never saw it before. Every time. It's like, oh, that was brilliant, and I never saw something like that. So if that's true of these sort of not important things, think of how much truer that is of relationships. Think of, right, how that's typically the solution. A couple gets bored with each other, not when they spend a lot of time together, but when they don't. We get uninterested in God, not when we spend a lot of time in prayer, but when we don't. If you devote time, if you have the discipline of devoting time and attention, you will be surprised by perfection. You will be surprised by order, by the fact of how good it is. You want more when you spend the time, right? People don't know that. And so they think they have to choose between surprise and order. They think either I'm going to go with order because that's safe, and I can be secure as long as I have order in my life. Or they think, I'm going to choose surprise because I want life to be exciting. And when you choose either or with beauty, you get modern life, boy. You get disorder and banality. So that's point 2. Disorder is when you choose surprise apart from order. Instead of beauty, you go for shock. And this has always been part of the human condition. I got to tell you, I never really understood it before researching beauty. Because I had read some of the ancient literature, like Ovid, Oh man, I don't know if you've ever read the Metamorphoses, but it's dark. It's like people getting twisted and perverted by the gods and mutilated and transformed in really ugly ways. Right? It's the Colosseum. Let's go watch someone get torn to death by animals. For fun. What are you doing Saturday night? I'm going to go watch someone get torn to death. It's, it's horror movies now, right? It's Quentin Tarantino. It's snuff pictures. You heard of those? Where people will pay to watch these underground movies of someone getting killed. Right? What's going on? Well, you get addicted to surprise. You pursue surprise at all costs. And the cheapest way of getting surprise is to deviate from order. Right? Someone won't surprise you if they eat meat and vegetables. But they'll surprise you if they try to eat tin cans. A woman won't surprise you if she waves to you on the street and smiles politely. But she will surprise you if she suddenly punches you in the neck, right? Or if she walks out to the middle of the street and gets hit. So by a car or something, right? So if you're going to go just surprise for its own sake, there is no nightmare that you will not end up at. Because the love of surprise, the addiction to shock, is like any other addiction. It is subject to the law of diminishing returns. And you will get harder and harder to surprise until you get to the point where your life has become seeking for one horror more horrible than the last. And that is a definition of hell. Where the best you can hope for is something more horrible than you've thought up yet. People are living this way all the time. People are mutilating themselves. People are doing freaky things just to do freaky things. Why? Why? Because they're monsters? No! Because they were made for beauty. They were made for surprise. But now, they've taken this one human dimension and swollen it out of all proportion, which is what an addiction is. This is nowhere more clear than in the realm of sexuality. Sexuality is an area of beauty. It is an area of order and surprise. It is an area of the most amazing structure that all comes together. And yeah, as I mentioned, it's totally surprising, right? You remember the first time you found out where babies come from, right? It's totally surprising. But it's perfectly designed, right? What is sexual love? Sexual love is where every human love comes together. Emotional, physical, personal, everything comes together like the gears of a clock, right? It is the way, as we'll talk about, it is the number one way two people can give to each other the most completely. It's gorgeous, it's unbelievable, and it's really surprising. And one of the things you notice about this surprise is what happens when that mechanism gets thrown out of balance. You need surprise to take delight in human sexuality. Why? Because sexuality is beautiful. That's why we always talk about, oh, she's beautiful and I'm attracted to her. Those are not two separate statements. Those go together, right? Crocodiles do not pursue female crocodiles because they think they're beautiful, right? But with us, attraction, physical attraction, is wrapped up in the idea of beauty because we say, she is orderly and she surprises me. She's perfect and I'm astonished at her perfection. That's sexual love. That's part of the dynamic of it. Okay. And that makes sense, right? Because, of course, we're different. Men and women are different, and so we each find the other surprising. And that's part of the whole experience. Now, I want to talk about two ways that surprise mechanism, that surprise component of sexuality, can get thrown out of balance. The first, and this is very tragic, and this is sort of just, a preliminary point on homosexuality. You may know that the number one, it's not an absolute, but the number one correlate, not cause, just correlate, for identifying pre-homosexuality is when the child fails to relate to the same-sex peer group, whether same-sex parent or same-sex group at school or whatever. They don't feel, as one man I know said it, you don't feel, if you're a man, you don't feel like you qualify as a man, right? And so in sexuality, there's this principle, the exotic becomes erotic. In other words, what we are unfamiliar with, what we still find surprising or strange or other to us, we are attracted to sexually. So if you have spent your childhood, and you're a man, but you feel like masculinity is something foreign to you, something exotic, something you've never understood, but you wish you had more unity with, boom, hit puberty, and that exoticism becomes eroticized. You say, I want that. Okay? So it's very interesting the way, in a large part, homosexuality depends on you not knowing that you have what you have. And so you desire what you already have because what you have feels foreign to you. But again, what does that show? It shows that surprise. If you're surprised, in San Francisco, there are all these men on the beaches who just walk around naked. And it's very tragic because what you have is men who are constantly surprised at their own masculinity. And what they should be doing is being surprised in the other and not in themselves. Because they're fractured, they're shocked at themselves when they should be delighted and astonished at the beauty of the other. Okay. Here's another way, probably more relevant to us, or to some of us, that mechanism can get thrown out of balance. Because you need surprise to be sexually, especially for a man, to be sexually motivated, if you get addicted to that feeling of surprise, you will go to some very dark places. In other words, once you cut the surprise of sexuality off from the order of sexuality, it instantly fetishizes. Pornography addicts, they do not just look at pictures of beautiful women. They look at weird stuff instantly. And it gets weirder and weirder and weirder. Why? For all the same reasons we were talking about. Because you get addicted to shock. Because you get glutted on surprise, and so you're harder to surprise, and it becomes harder to surprise you. Which is why, as most people know, pornography leads to impotence in men. They have made themselves so resistant to shock that they can no longer respond even to their wives. You know what's amazing to me? I mean, it's amazing how good it is to be Catholic. All around this country, there are sex shops, right? Shops that sell various paraphernalia. You know where those exist? To make sex exciting. Do you know what that means? It means we are a society that has gotten bored with sex. How did that happen? How can you get bored? How can you get bored in sex? Well, because we've been so indulgent in surprise that we can't feel surprise anymore. And so we've lost it. Oh, it's so bad. It's so sad. And by the way, the Catholic system, it's a great system. Because sex on demand will make you bored with sex. But in the Catholic system, sex leads to kids. And kids make it so that you do not have sex on demand. Wow, how great! And not having sex on demand means that you are always surprised. You are always astonished. That's what it's supposed to be. You're supposed to be, I can't believe how good this is. That's what it is, by the way. That's the experience. That's what it means. That's why God gave us this gift. So that you can say, this is too much good. I can't handle it. Instead of what it's become for so many people, especially for so many men, but more women now. Not, this is so good I can't handle it, but I wonder if there's anything sicker I can find that I haven't thought of yet that could make me feel something. Pornography addicts know, especially, I'm talking mostly to men, but again, it's a very rising field for women. Pornography addicts have not delighted in the beauty of a woman for a long time. They have not, and it cuts them. It cuts them. So what is the solution to an addiction to disorder? The solution, as we all know, is self-denial. The solution is to fast from any kind of addiction, really from any kind of stimulation to a particular area of surprise that we've gotten used to. You have to fast. So there's this principle, aesthetics means beauty, right? And ascetics means fasting and self-discipline. So the ancient principle is that ascetics always make the best aesthetics. In other words, if you want to appreciate beauty, you must live a life of self-denial. That's the only way. And that is especially true in the sexual realm, but it's true in every realm. If you want to experience surprise, what you have to do is, you're right, if you have an addiction, if you have a struggle, you're going to have to walk a long, dry road with no surprises for a long time. You're going to have to give up surprise for a long time. You're going to have to fast from surprise. And it's going to feel awful. By the way, gambling addiction is another type of addiction to surprise. It's an addiction to thrill and to rush. And you have to give it up. But you know what happens at the end? You know what's great? Is if you give it up long enough, if you give up surprise long enough, you get to a place called innocence. And innocence is where beauty happens. So I'm just telling you, if you have not celebrated beauty in a long time because you're addicted to disorder, you can feel it again. God will give you the taste of innocence. He will give you delight, not in the weird or the perverse. He will give you delight in the good. It might be a long way away, but it's what we live for, it's what we're made for, it's worth it. Secondly, banality. Banality is a little different. Banality is the temptation of some conservatives. Banality says, I want to be safe. And so to be safe, I'm just going to do what I've always done. I'm going to rely on what has always happened. I'm going to do it the same again and again and again. I want to be safe. Let me tell you something. God did not invite us to be safe. Christianity, morality, the life of the gospel is not a life of safety. We must not. People do this all the time. You're probably safe either way. That is not a good system. Safety is no part of martyrdom. Safety is no part of heroism. Doing the same thing over and over again is not what it means to have a tradition. To have a tradition means that we have a basis in order, and that from that basis we become creative. But remember what God himself says, I make all things new. We are supposed to be a part of that. We are supposed to be creative. We're supposed to be original. We are supposed to take the gospel and proclaim it in ways that it's never been proclaimed before, and live it in ways it's never been lived before. That's what the saints have always done. They took the gospel and they kept it exciting. Remember the early fathers, they're like, we're going to go out to the desert. I'm going to go live on top of a pillar. I'm going to walk around barefoot and beg people for stuff. Why? Because it hasn't been done and it's a great way to be holy. The way you kill beauty is by choosing order apart from surprise. And this is just my little opinion. What isn't really that I'm talking about, but this is more my opinion than all the rest. I would suggest to you that here's a system for understanding the difference between good conservative and bad conservative. Right? Like almost the difference between Catholics and tradition and like Pius X or something. For a true Catholic, the present moment is always more of an opportunity than a threat. That's what it means to be a true Catholic. It means the present is more an opportunity than a threat. Whenever someone starts reacting to the world or our current situation more as though it's a threat than an opportunity, it shows that the courage of the gospel is waning. It shows that they are going to circle the wagons and let's just keep our heads down and do what we've been doing. And that is not the service of the one who makes all things new. Okay. So to be very clear, banality happens when you want to be safe, and when you make that your number one priority. Instead of making beauty, instead of making goodness, instead of making truth your number one, you just make security. And that's a lack of fortitude. That's a lack of courage. It takes courage to do something new. While, of course, respecting the tradition, while respecting order and human nature, and all the foundations of the faith. To do something new takes courage, and we're obliged to do it. God gave us creativity for a reason. He wants us to sing a new song unto the Lord. All right. How does this happen? Right, it's caused by a lack of fortitude. What are the two forms it takes? Two forms. Two forms that banality takes. One is thoughtlessness. If you are thoughtless, you will kill the beauty even of good things. I had a friend recently who he lost a kid. And he was talking about all the things that these other Christians were saying to him by way of comfort. And you know what he said? He said they were just reciting the same old things. None of them was thinking, what can I actually say that expresses the truth I want to convey? There's nothing wrong with using old formulas. There's nothing wrong with using old we say the same creed every Sunday at Mass, right? But if we say it thoughtlessly, we'll kill it. The creed is supposed to be a window through which the light of beauty comes. If we say it thoughtlessly, what we are doing is we are filling that window with dirt so that the window actually blocks instead of expressing the light of the gospel. There's a beautiful story, a beautiful book called The Bridge Over San Luis Rey. And at one point, someone has just tried to commit suicide, and his friend, the captain, just cut him down. And the captain reaches for words, and he's a simple man, and he's not eloquent. He doesn't have a lot of new things to say. But he says from his heart, we have to keep going. We have to. We just have to. And because he doesn't say it thoughtlessly, it works. So it's okay to use old forms. It's okay to use established expressions. Just don't do it thoughtlessly. You know, one of the things I used in the book, and some people got mad at me for this, but a white picket fence, nothing wrong with a white picket fence, except it's flipping everywhere, and it's become this standard symbol for like normal, regular, middle-class existence. Boring. Don't make beautiful things boring by overusing them thoughtlessly. That is our charge with the Catholic heritage, with our artistic heritage, with our Western Christendom heritage. Don't make it boring by being thoughtless. And secondly, probably even more, banality comes from just sheer convenience worship. Roger Scruton, who's probably the greatest philosopher of beauty alive today, calls it the cult of utility. In other words, what do? We do whatever's easy. This is what causes a consumerist economy. We do whatever's easy. We have pre-packaged food that all tastes the same. We drive in cars that all look alike. We live in houses that are all exactly the same model. Why? Because it's cheap, it's fast, it's convenient. Disorder makes you want something you've never imagined. Banality, well, let me give you a good example. There's a video called Why Beauty Matters. It's a good video. I recommend it. It's on YouTube. And it shows a driveway of Michelangelo's David. You know Michelangelo's David, right? The statue of the David? This driveway has 50 copies of the statue lined up in a row. You would not believe how awful it looks. The dull repetition. I'm sure it was very cheap. I'm sure it was very easy to put up. Sure, cost no effort. It's no good. The same clothes, the same brand, the same stuff as everyone else has. Nobody wants that. Okay. So, how do you do it? How do you keep from getting banal? Well, point 3, I think, gives one of the best answers. There's a book. Let me tell you about this book if you haven't already read it. I'm going to ruin it for you because my talk is more important than your reading experience. It's called Man Alive. It's by G.K. Chesterton. I just think it's one of the best. It was one of the most influential novels in my life. Read it as a kid. It's about a man who is accused of a lot of different crimes. And they take him to court. And they find that there's an interesting pattern in all his crimes. So for instance, he's accused of polygamy, marrying a lot of women. And then they find out that it's the same woman he's marrying every time. He marries her regularly to keep it fresh. And they accuse him of stealing because someone sees him go into a house and take stuff through the chimney. And then they find out it's his house. And he's stealing from his own house and going in like a thief to realize how blessed he really is. They accuse him of abandoning his family because he leaves his house and he says, I'm going to my other family. And then he walks around the world so he can come home and delight in the family he's always had. At the end of the story, they say that the secret to happiness is to keep the commandments and to break the conventions. This is what the saints did. They kept the commandments. If you keep the commandments, it assures you that your life will be orderly. That your life will not twist and warp you and break you. But if you break the conventions, if you live differently, it promises that when people look at you, they won't say, oh, there's just another normal Christian doing the same old thing, playing it safe and boring. And you know, it really is surprising, actually, when you live the gospel. It's funny, I was in a dad's group back in Kansas where I used to live. And we were reading the gospel about how Jesus says, oh man, this is not safe. Huh, okay. I'm not. It's a disordered podium. It will surprise us all as I fall on my face. We read the gospel where it talked about Jesus saying, if anyone would be my disciple, let him carry his cross and follow me. Right? And one of the guys in our group said, guys, I don't know what to do because I keep reading this gospel. This is powerful. This is a powerful experience. I keep reading this gospel and I keep thinking, I must not be a true disciple because I'm not carrying my cross. He said, I'm married to a woman I just think is so beautiful inside and out. I got 7 kids that I love so much. I got a good job that takes care of us. He said, so where's my cross? How can I be a true disciple? Where's my cross? And we were all quiet for a little bit because we're like, yeah, shoot, we all have it so good. How can we be true Christians? How can this be the gospel? And I was the first to snap out of it. I said, Tim, do you understand that from the outside, not only do you have a cross, but it looks like your life is unlivable? First of all, you've only ever been with one woman your whole life. Most people think that just sounds like an impossible burden and prison. Secondly, your oldest son has Down syndrome. Thirdly, you homeschool, you take care of all these kids because you don't have birth control. That's unlivable. Who could do that? That savage, primitive, inhuman lifestyle. Fourthly, your baby just died. You know, a couple weeks after birth, and you and your wife slept with her between you before you buried her in a handmade little casket in the morning. Do you understand that from the outside, Your life is so countercultural that people don't think it's possible to live. People think it's insane, it's psychotic. That's only someone in the grip of an enslaved fear of hell would deal with it. And you sit here and you say, but where's my cross? I'm looking for my cross and I'm nervous I don't have it. That's the gospel. That's beautiful. It's where it blows you away with the goodness. And the whole world is astonished. And the whole world says, how can this be? How can they do this? Okay, that's available. That's the Catholic life. Whether you're in habits or not, right now, you can shock, you can astonish, you can inspire people with the order and the joy of just living as a Christian. Let's pray for that grace. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Our Father, who art in heaven,